How's everyone doing? Okay, so I want to talk about 3 different areas which Maker is pursuing in the coming year. And so one of them is technology, the second is real-world finance, and last is kind of this transformation to a DAO. So starting with the tech, what are we doing, where are we going, what is happening with the ecosystem, and how does Maker kind of fit into that? Later this month, we're going to be releasing what we are calling Maker Teleport. And so what Maker Teleport is, well, one, it's a bridge, but it's a very kind of special kind of bridge. The problem that you have right now when you have all of these different kinds of bridges is that tokens are not fungible, right? You have bridge hacks, right, where maybe you're trading your tokens on some other chain, but the underlying bridge that you use gets hacked, right, and the underlying assets, right, are gone, and so these tokens that you're using on this other chain, right, are valueless. And so what does that really mean? Well, it means that these tokens on other chains, they're not fungible. Like, they're not the real thing. They're something else. Like, you could think of, like, if you have DAI on Ethereum, right, and you bridge to Polygon. What do you have on Polygon, right? Do you have DAI on there? No, you have what's called a wrapped kind of token. You have an IOU. You have something that can be redeemed for real DAI through the Polygon bridge. And so this is the problem that we're trying to solve with Maker Teleport is we want the DAI that you have on any chain to be like the real DAI, to be completely fungible with any other DAI. So if you have a DAI on Optimism, if you have a DAI on Arbitrum, on Starknet, on Polygon, it should absolutely be the exact same thing. So Maker Teleport is going to be coming out later this month, and one really cool feature, I would say, is that because we kind of control the minting of DAI via the protocol, we can let you avoid the roll-up kind of exit delays, right? So typically with a roll-up, right, when you want to remove your tokens from the roll-up, right, there is a kind of, it tends to be a 1-week type of delay. And that's supposed to be a dispute period, right, for a fraudulent transaction, right, to get flagged. Using Maker Teleport, you will not have to wait the dispute period because essentially what our oracles will do is they will run the transactions themselves and verify that the transaction is not fraudulent, and then just mint you brand new DAI. And then the DAI that you are exiting 1 week from now will just be transferred to the protocol, and then we'll burn it and net everything out. So using Maker Teleport, you can absolutely avoid any of these roll-up exit delays, and it's all instant. The second thing I want to talk about is cross-domain Maker. So cross-domain Maker is essentially deploying Maker on other chains, but it's deploying Maker in a very special way, right? We talked about this idea of fungibility, right? That a DAI that you have on one chain should be the exact same as the DAI on another, and so this means that you can't have instances on other chains minting DAI, right? Minting DAI has to come from a singular type of source, right? If you were to mint it from different sources, right, it wouldn't be the same DAI. It would be different. And so essentially what we've done is we've set up this like master-slave type of relationship where the central hub is the Maker protocol on Ethereum. And then we kind of deploy what we call subdomains. So we'll deploy a Maker subdomain on Optimism, on Arbitrum, on Starknet, on Polygon, on ZK Sync. And the way that these subdomains work is that the Ethereum chain will delegate some amount of credit to these other chains. So say we mint 100 million DAI on Ethereum, and we delegate it to the Optimism subdomain. Now people can go on Optimism, and they can borrow DAI on Optimism, and it dips into this 100 million credit line that we've extended to the Optimism subdomain. And so from a risk standpoint, this works really well, right? Because we can essentially evaluate the risk of different chains and say, okay, we're willing to commit this much capital to this chain because we believe that, there's maybe a chance something could go wrong, right? And, we don't want to have it be an existential threat, right? We don't want unlimited minting of DAI to happen on that chain, right, if something goes wrong. And so this credit delegation is a mechanism, right, to avoid those types of scenarios, which is very prudent, right, because all of these are very new chains. I don't know if you remember very early into Ethereum's, right, life, right, there was quite a few hiccups, and that's normal, right? Like when you have new chains, right, it's quite normal that you have some issues, right? And so with all of these new rollups, like yes, they're super scalable, but you really have to do risk management on them because they are very young chains and they will still have some hiccups. Okay, next I want to talk about real-world financing because this is the direction that DeFi is going to go in the next few years. DeFi for BUIDLers, DeFi for crypto people, okay, that's interesting. But where DeFi is really going is starting to make an impact in the real world. And we have several advantages that are going to act as a catalyst to this process. I want to start off with a deal that actually was just confirmed yesterday. So this is brand new. So Société Générale is, I believe, the third or fourth largest bank in France. They're one of the largest investment banks in the world and have about $1.5 trillion in assets under management. Société Générale is, they kind of made history a couple of years ago when they released the first kind of on-chain bond. And so these are euro-denominated bonds, and they are backed by French mortgages, right? So home loans. They're rated AAA by Standard & Poor's and Fitch, and they mature in 2025. And so what are we doing with Société Générale? Well, they're going to refinance these bonds. So we are onboarding these bonds as collateral into Maker, and Société Générale will be taking a $30 million loan in DAI to refinance the bonds, and then Maker will hold the bonds until maturity in 2025. This is huge, and I really mean that because it's kind of the first instance of a major investment bank, right, interacting with DeFi, right? And to me, this is just a start, right? DeFi, I think, has an enormous advantage, and Maker in particular, right? Because Maker has no cost of capital, right? We can just mint DAI out of thin air as long as it's backed by something, right? So unlike a traditional bank, right, which when you lend to someone, right, you have an opportunity cost of, well, maybe I should have lent to someone else, or I needed to source this money from somewhere, and so I'm paying interest on it as well, right? Maker doesn't have that. So we can essentially undercut most traditional finance institutions on rates. And so I think that this property is going to be really attractive for traditional finance institutions. And so this is just going to be an innate advantage, right, that DeFi, but in particular Maker has when it comes to financing things in the real world. So next, I want to talk about Huntington Valley Bank. So this is also a deal that went through yesterday in conjunction with the Société Générale deal. Huntington Valley Bank is somewhat of a smaller bank. It's a US bank chartered in Pennsylvania. They're trying to get a $100 million credit line to originate loans, right? So they're a bank, they give out loans, and Maker can give them really, really cheap capital, right? So utilizing this property that I just talked about of Maker being able to undercut anyone on rates, right? Because we have the power to mint DAI. As part of incentive alignment, right? We don't want the bank to make bad loans, you know? So we're requiring Huntington Valley Bank to retain at least 50% of the loans on their own balance sheet, right? And so that means that you know, they're incentivized to only originate good loans because they have to actually, you know, have the financial consequence if those loans go bad. And the way that these assets are going to be held, right? Because it's always a little tricky trying to do things like securitization on chain. What we're going to do is we have a trust set up of which MakerDAO is the beneficiary, and then the assets, in this case the loans, will be held in the trust, and the trustee essentially has very specific instructions in terms of that they have to listen to Maker governance. So only MKR token holders actually can decide what happens to the assets in the trust. And this is how we kind of keep everything permissionless and ensure that everything kind of liquidations, right, happen in an orderly type of fashion. So here's the governance vote that just happened the other day that ratified the Société Générale and Huntington Valley Bank deals. So glad to see. Some of you may recognize Du. I know he's big here in Korea, so he is the top voter on this proposal. Moving on, the last deal I want to talk about is Monitalis. So Monitalis is a UK-based company, and they're going to help Maker solve a very specific problem. Maybe many of you don't know this, but Maker has about $4.5 billion, or $4 to $4.5 billion of stablecoins on its balance sheet. We created what's called a peg stability module a couple of years ago, and it essentially allows anyone to lock up a stablecoin like USDC or like, you know, Pax USD or Gemini USD, and essentially do a swap and mint DAI 1-to-1. And so this was a very useful property for arbitraging the peg, right? It was a very useful property for us securing the peg, you know, hard line at 1, right? Because anytime DAI was trading above, you know, $1, it was profitable for someone else to just, you know, put some stable coins in the PSM, mint some DAI, right, and arbitrage it back down to $1. But the side effect of this was that we just started accumulating masses and masses and masses of stablecoins in the protocol, right? And so this is kind of problematic from two different perspectives. On the one hand, right, this is kind of dead money, right? We don't do anything with the stablecoins, right? So we're not making any money off of that. And two, right, it's a bit of a centralization risk, right, when you have that much of your balance sheet, you know, dependent on, you know, someone like Circle or someone like Paxos, right? So the deal that we're doing with Monitalis is going to see Maker kind of shift that balance sheet exposure, right, to and diversify it to other sources. So in particular here, we're talking about US Treasury bills. And so U.S. Treasury bills are yielding, have quite good yield at the moment, right? Equity markets are a little bit scared. Bond markets are doing quite well. So while they're currently yielding 3%, I think 3% yield is probably quite optimistic going forward. But at the current yield, right, if you were to jam 4 billion of stablecoins into treasury bills, we could be earning about 120 million in revenue, and that would really kind of secure the financial sustainability of the protocol. And it's right. Treasury bills are quite low risk. I mean, if treasury bills fail, we have much bigger problems in the world. So in terms of risk exposure, this is much better than something like USDC or something like Paxos. So the last thing I want to talk about today is kind of this really ambitious and challenging transformation that Maker has undergone in the past year. We used to have the Maker Foundation, whose kind of mission it was to kind of bootstrap the protocol, bootstrap the DAO, bootstrap, governance, until one day where, it could run on its own. And so exactly a year ago, last summer, we made the call. And we made the call and said, okay, we're shutting down the foundation, and we're going to be a DAO in the truest sense of the word. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, it looks like where you essentially don't have any legal structure anymore. It looks like where if you want to work on Maker, you have to approach the DAO and you have to say, hey, I want to do this and I need this much funding. And token holders can say yes or they can say no. And so currently, there are 20 completely independent core units. So you can think about a core unit almost like a business unit, right, or like a team, right? So me personally, for example, I run the Oracle core unit. So and I just recently had to go through this process, right, of, hey, DAO, here's what I want to work on, right? Here's all the cool Oracle stuff I want to do. Here is the budget that I'm going to need for the next year. What do you think? Do you approve, or do you think I should go work on something else? That's going to go for a vote in about 2 weeks. So hopefully I can be up here next year doing the same thing, but we'll see. But this idea, I think, is really powerful, right? Because it essentially means that Maker becomes a headless type of organization, right? There's no CEO, there's no leadership team, there's no management. There's just builders. There's just builders and builders and builders and builders. And it makes the protocol so much more resilient, right? Like, if you want to do something efficiently, make a company, right? Have a top-down hierarchy, have, directors and VPs and CEOs and COOs and CFOs, right? If you want to do something efficiently, make a company. But if you want to make something resilient, make a DAO, right? If anything, for example, were to happen to me, right, or to my team, it's no big deal. The DAO can just, find another team, find someone else to lead oracles. It's no big deal, right? Same thing with, say, the smart contracts, or same thing with the risk analysis, right? Or same thing with the business development team, right? Or the team that handles all of the real-world financing deals, right? Being a DAO essentially makes you like a hydra, right? So like this Greek mythological, right, being, right, that has, as soon as you cut off like one of its head, right, 2 other heads appear in its place. And this idea is so powerful, and it definitely came. It was definitely taxing a little bit, right? Trying to get these people that were so used to working in a company, to work kind of independently in a DAO. But we finally completed this transformation, and now that we're here, right? I think it's going to serve as kind of an example for the rest of the industry, right? To follow, and I think you're going to see many DAOs kind of adopt this model over the coming years. So that's all the time I have today. If you want to keep in touch or ask me any questions, you can message me on Twitter, Telegram, or just shoot me an email. If you're interested in working for Maker, and in particular working for the Oracles team, please reach out. We are always hiring. It doesn't matter what you do. We just want the best people. So if you're good, please reach out. Awesome. Thank you so much.